Welcome to the Quantum World, the TV, the voice of Quantum University. I am Paul Drouin, a medical doctor from Canada, president and founder of Quantum University. And this morning we have this extraordinary event and program on the brain, mind, and the effect of placebo. Something very important is happening now in the world of modern medicine. And for Quantum University, it's very meaningful since we are offering programs and degree in the field of natural medicine and integrative medicine. Modern medicine needs proof. And this proof, you will see, doesn't come from the back door, but this very exciting domain of research, which is neuroscience. And this morning we have two eminent doctors and scientists, and I would say more than that. They are pioneers in this field of quantum medicine to establish really a scientific ground. I have on my side here Dr. Jeffrey Fannin, who is a doctor in psychology, has done a lot of years in research and training, over 20 years, and is also the founder and executive director of a Center for Cognitive Enhancement. He's also part of the team at Arizona State University researching neuroscience. And of course, his work focuses on the subtle energy and quantum feeling effect on the brain. He's also working with Quantum University now to prepare a new program and a certification in brain mapping and neurofeedback, and this will be a premiere. This is also very exciting for us. And we have also, at distance, Dr. Joe Dispenza. Good morning or good afternoon. And I don't think he needs too much introduction, but he's very known, of course. We already are a doctor in chiropractic, and he lectures in many countries over the world, 24 different countries. He's was featured in the very popular movie, What the Bleep Do We Know, and other very known movie, but also author of 3 books now, How to Evolve Your Brain, Breaking the Habit to Being Yourself, and now this more recent one, You Are the Placebo, and I think this morning he will be very pleased to speak about it. So we also have with Dr. Dispenza done a course, and we're very proud to have him on our curriculum, the course video classes titled Brain and Neuroplasticity. So we will not wait more than to have these two pioneers that sometimes I compare to the world of quantum physics with Einstein and Edinburgh. You know, if you didn't have made any proof of this a fascinating concept, which is out today, quantum physics. It's same thing in quantum medicine. You know, this I think will be part of the history. And thank you very much to be with us today. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, I'll start off by talking a little about how the book You Are the Placebo came about. And I'll talk about some of the research that we've been doing over the last year and a half or so. And then we'll bring in Dr. Fannin to show some of the brain maps that we've done on some of our participants in the workshops that we've done around the world. And the whole premise of the book is very simple. You are already everything that you want to create, and that you have all of the resources to create the outcomes that you want in your life. And that premise is what started me on this search in this book. Probably about 3 years ago, we started seeing in our workshops people healing themselves of MS right during a meditation. We saw people heal themselves of lupus, of rare genetic disorders that medical science had no solution for. And we started seeing a trend taking place. And when it happens once, it's usually considered an incident. But when you start seeing it happen more and more often, there must be some cause that's producing an effect. And the quantum model of reality says that subjective mind has some effect on objective reality. And when we started seeing all these different spontaneous remissions from conditions, I started thinking about this idea. And the idea is the placebo effect. If you give someone a sugar pill or a saline injection, if you give them a false procedure or a sham surgery, a certain percentage of those people will actually get better by thought alone. In other words, those people are putting their faith, belief, and acceptance into something outside of them. And when they put that much of their intention behind an outcome, their body begins to produce the same pharmacy of chemicals as if they've taken the drug, a false drug, or taken a real drug, or had some type of procedure done. So the question is, do you really need something outside of you to change something inside of you? Or if you understand the scientific research based on the placebo, can you teach people to do the same thing? And should you be able to measure the effects? So there are three elements that allow the placebo to actually work, according to my research. The first element is what we call conditioning. And conditioning is based on Pavlov's simple theory that if you produce a stimulus, if an organism interacts with that stimulus, it'll produce some type of response. And that response usually is an experience that has some emotional payoff, or there's a change in the organism's internal state. Well, if you keep applying the same stimulus over time, the organism begins to become conditioned to the outcome. If you then couple another stimulus, a conditioned stimulus, with the other stimulus, then in time you can take away the original stimulus and you can produce the same effect. And Pavlov did it with his dogs, and he rang a bell and fed him a meal, and rang a bell and fed him a meal. And the conditioned stimulus of ringing the bell over time produced a biological change, as if they were being presented with the food. So when we work with the placebo response, the same exact thing happens. If you give someone, for example, a medication that takes away pain, and you keep providing them that medication over time, their body will begin to memorize the chemical change. If you begin to take away that pill and you substitute another pill that's just a sugar pill or a starch pill, in certain percentages of people, their body will produce the same pain-relieving chemicals as if they've taken the actual drug. In other words, their body began to make their own blend of chemicals because it memorized the effect. And so if you begin to teach people how to condition their body to thought alone and begin to anticipate an outcome, they can begin to produce the same biological changes without anything exterior to them. The second element of the placebo response has to do with what we call expectation. So when you begin to live your normal life every single day, thinking the same thoughts, making the same choices, living by the same behaviors, creating the same experiences to produce the same emotions, that in time, you begin to hardwire your biology and your neural circuitry, and you even begin to signal the same genes in the same way that keep you expecting the same outcomes in your life. Well, when you give someone hope and you give them a new drug, or you tell them that they're going to get a new procedure that could possibly help them, if the person begins to select a different potential in the quantum field, instead of the same thought that leads to the same sequence of behaviors that create the same experiences and emotions, but they begin to think about a new possible outcome, and they begin to emotionally embrace that future experience, it is the emotional embracing of the experience that begins to plant the seed in the autonomic nervous system. And again, a certain percentage of patients will begin to produce biological changes by thought alone. And so people who take a placebo are accepting, believing, and surrendering to an outcome without analysis. And it's that particular formula that allows that information to be encoded into the autonomic nervous system. So we are teaching our students in our workshops to do that exact thing. We're asking them to select different potentials in the quantum field and beginning to emotionally embrace the outcome. And as they condition their body over and over again, they're also changing their physiology long enough so that the body moves into a new state of being. And we'll talk about some of the experiences that we've had when Dr. Fannin and I show a little some of the research that we've done. The third element that allows the placebo to work so well is what we call assigning meaning to something. In other words, all of this information that you learn in this presentation, as well as any information you learn about quantum physics or neuroscience or epigenetics, is all vital information for you to understand clear the nature of reality. So the more you get clear on the nature of reality, the more you understand what you're doing and how it works, the better results you'll get. So in our workshops, we use the quantum model of reality. We use neuroplasticity as an understanding to help people understand how mind can change. We talk quite a bit about hormones and epigenetics, and we talk a lot about protein productions and stem cells, because we want to give our students the proper resources to understand that they come preloaded with all the biological and neurological machinery to begin to make their own difference in their lives. So the more they understand what they're doing, the more they understand the science behind it, the better they can execute results. And so the concept that was created as a result of our students doing the uncommon was this concept called information to transformation. If you give students the proper information, philosophical, scientific, theoretical information, and then they can actually repeat that information. Now, repeating the information allows them to wire that information in their brain. They're developing a model of understanding. And once they have it wired in their brain, if you can begin to give them the proper instruction to show them how they can apply that, and if they can get their behaviors to match their intentions, if they can get their actions equal to their thoughts, they should have some type of new experience. And that new experience should transform them in some way. Now, if we could measure that transformation and gather and interpret what that information means, that's more information for us to teach transformation the next time. And if we can measure that transformation again, that's again more information for us to teach transformation. And we can begin to close the gap between knowledge and experience. So the book, You Are The Placebo, really is a study in the idea of how you can heal yourself by thought alone. And so we use meditation as the model. And the purpose of meditation, number one, is to get beyond the analytical mind. Now, what separates the conscious mind from the subconscious mind is the analytical mind. And it's only when you and I get beyond our typical thinking, the way we're analyzing information, get beyond our conscious processing, do we finally enter into the subconscious systems where we can begin to make significant physiological changes. And we've discovered over the course of the last year and a half that that's a skill, just like golf or tennis, that you and I are our best when we get out of our own way. And when we get beyond our typical routine thinking, we have access to greater potentials. So we use meditation as the model to teach people how to change beliefs and perceptions about themselves and their lives, to begin to reprogram new genes in new ways, to help them remove filters or limited perceptions and beliefs, attitudes, emotional addictions, the stories we tell about ourselves that are based on our past that really block the flow of our innate possibilities and potentials. So if you're going to become your own individual healer, your own genetic engineer, then you have to begin to understand what it means to be thought alone. So when our students get beyond themselves, what they do is they move into the present moment. And when you move into the present moment, number one, you have access to all possibilities that exist in the quantum field. And you get beyond your face, your gender, your culture, you get beyond your profession, you get beyond your family, you get beyond your identity that's connected to the car you drive and the people you know and the things that you do and the place that you live. You get to a point where you become nobody, no one, no thing, nowhere in no time. You become pure consciousness. You become a thought in possibility. And it's in that place where we have seen our students consistently do the uncommon. So if we're spending the majority of our life bracing ourselves for the worst case scenario that could possibly happen in the future because of our experiences of the past, then for the most part, we are siphoning energy away from the present moment. We are reducing our field of possibilities because we are selecting a potential in the quantum field, which is a limited potential. We're emotionally embracing that outcome, and we're already predetermined to a specific reality. So this becomes a habit for most of us, and getting people to move into the present moment, what we call the sweet spot, is when they begin to access unlimited amounts of energy, begin to access internal experiences that become more real than past experiences that they've had that define them. And they begin to create some pretty mystical moments that redefine them as an identity. And so we have been fortunate enough over the course of the last year and a half to capture and measure some brainwave changes that have taken place in individuals during our workshops in real time. And so when you see enough people doing that, and doing the uncommon that's already innately who we are, it gives us permission to believe in greater possibilities for ourselves. And so we have labored over the course of the last year in demystifying the mystical, so that when you see someone talk about an inner experience that they've had during a meditation that to them was so real that in clinical settings you would never see this in terms of people's brainwaves. You would never see these significant changes taking place. And they can't make their brain do that voluntarily. In other words, you're going to see some pretty exciting slides in a few minutes. And those slides are going to show you that whatever that person is experiencing in that moment is more real than any outer experience that they've had in their life. So they can't voluntarily make their brain do that, which means that it's happening to them. They're accessing a stream of information that you and I are connected to in the quantum field that their brain is processing. And we're capturing that information in a functional scan, and we are correlating the internal changes that are happening with those individuals and the stories that they tell with some very significant objective measurements. And we haven't seen it happen once, and we haven't seen it happen twice. We're seeing it happen consistently, over and over again. So we know then that when they're totally in the present moment and they get beyond their identity, they become pure consciousness. That's the moment they have access to enormous amounts of information. And so not only are they not able to voluntarily change their brainwaves like that, but when that inner experience for them is more real than any outer experience, that's the moment their biology changes. In other words, experience rewrites the circuitry in your brain, and if the experience produces a strong emotional experience internally, or a strong energetic signature, it is both a mental, biological, physiological change, and even a genetic change in that moment. And the amplitude of that experience tends to transcend any past experience. And as a result, we've seen people with all kinds of health conditions in a matter of moments disappear. Now, this is not something you will see in a conventional setting. We are pushing the boundaries of convention. And so placebo responses work really well for pain management. There's placebo responses that work well for immune-mediated conditions. But what we're doing is we're pushing the envelope to a greater degree because we think that in time, we begin to accept more possibility in terms of what we can do as individuals. So the book, You Are The Placebo, it has become my passion because I now know that you don't have to put your faith and belief in some inert substance to get some type of sham or fake surgery to change your state of being. That you can change your state of being by choosing potential in the quantum field and beginning to make an unknown that sits there become more known to you. And if you keep revisiting by clear intention and elevated emotion, that is, clear intention is knowing what you want and combining it with an elevated emotion, then it are those two elements that cause you to move into a new state of being. And if you revisit that state of being every day, in time, you begin to change your biology. And we've seen enough people do it now to know that we can begin to step outside of the conventional understandings of what the placebo does to give people more resources to make changes for themselves in their life. Now, everybody is at different stages in their own personal development. But when you take a group of people and you ask them to retreat from their life just for 4 or 5 days and to remove the constant stimulation of their external environment that reminds them of who they think they are, to disconnect from their known personal reality long enough to change their personality. And they have a little bit of time to surrender into the present moment and get beyond their emotional addictions, get beyond their unconscious habits, to begin to change their beliefs about the nature of reality, to begin to alter their perceptions, and to stop reaffirming their personality based on a story that they tell about themselves. You begin to see people really make some significant changes in themselves internally. So I want to introduce now Dr. Jeffrey Fannin, who has been a great asset in making all of this research happen. I consider Jeffrey a dear friend and a colleague. He is, to me, a quantum neuroscientist. And when him and I first started working together, and I asked him to come on board and begin to study and map some of the students in our workshops, and I gave him the hypothesis of how I saw this going. He has been extremely open-minded. He has been diligent in working with us, in interpreting data, and never once has he ever really questioned possibility. Let me just say possibility. And so I think that both him and I have a passion to really demystify some of this information and make it more accessible to individuals. And we've become very good friends over the course of the last couple of years. And I think I'll speak for both of us that we have been pleasantly surprised in studying the uncommon. And for the most part, we're blown away by common people, just like you and I, doing the uncommon. And the premise I think that we both hold is that the more people begin to do the uncommon, the more we can share this information, the more we allow people to really give themselves permission to experience it. So I want to introduce a very dear friend and colleague of mine, Jeffrey Fannin, and we'll start off by bringing in some of the research that we've done.
Good morning, Joe. It's morning here in Hawaii, and it's afternoon where you are, and I'm sure it's evening in some of the locations with some of the viewers. So, welcome all. Good to see you again, Joe. I love the trees in the background there. It's a wonderful forest that we're looking at there. The some of this some of the people who are watching may not be very familiar with brain mapping. So I think what I'd like to do is be able to start off by explaining a little bit about what brain mapping is and what it does. So and we'll talk about QEEG brain mapping, and what that involves is quantitative electroencephalogram. So don't worry about having to remember that big long word. Just know that it is a way to take EEG information and quantify it to some degree. So let's take a quick look. When we put the cap on the head, we have 20 locations that we're going to measure. Brain mapping is really considered a non-invasive procedure where it looks a little uh, challenging there, like we're injecting something into their head, but we're simply putting the gel into the electrode so it can make contact with the scalp. And that when it makes contact with the scalp, then it's picking up the energy information coming from the brain, puts that information, the squiggly lines that a lot of people are very used to seeing, puts that on a graph so that we can look at the various frequencies and activity in those particular locations. When we transform that into what we call QEEG, the quantitative part of that, we're really converting those squiggly lines into some pictures like this. So what we're seeing is what we call tomography. So it's a little bit like that the weather maps that you might see on television, where it's taking information and it's showing us in some scale what that means. Let's talk a little bit about that scale. We measure this in standard deviations. So what exactly, when we look at a Gaussian distribution, a bell curve, if you will, of information where on the left we have the 3 standard deviations away from normal, and in the center we have what would be considered normal, and on the right-hand side 3 standard deviations above what would be considered normal. So as you're looking at these depictions, the normal range is going to be green. So anytime we see green on some of these brain maps that you're going to be looking at today, it indicates that that's in the normal range. Now let me clarify that. We're not talking about a normal human being. We're talking about normal EEG activity. As far as the normal human being is, we're still trying to discover what that entails, and so far it's been very evasive on us. So we'll just go with the normal EEG information. When we look at something that is yellow or orange, that's going to be considered 2 standard deviations above what is normal, and anything that we see that is red will be 3 standard deviations above normal. Then on the opposite end of the scale, something that is light blue would be 2 standard deviations below normal, and dark blue would be 3. So that's what you're going to be looking for, and we'll kind of explain that as we go along so that you can understand. But with the work that Dr. Joe and I have been doing, as well as in my clinic, there's a very decided difference between the information that we see in the clinic and the brain maps that we have seen when we are doing these events. And so it's helped us to redefine how we measure this, and also to better understand how to present the information to individuals. So one of the great opportunities that I have is pretty much on a daily basis is to talk with these people who have had their brain maps at these events, and we make a lot of discoveries simply by talking to them and understanding more about their experience. We've got some amazing cases to show you today, some things that haven't been revealed very much until now. But let's take a look at this. So when we are looking at this, you can see the top line of um, little heads there that each one of those heads represents a frequency or a vibration, if you will. So the top row we see 1, 2, and 3 hertz, and on the bottom row, or I mean the next row underneath that is 6, 7, 8, 9, and we can take these all the way up into the gamma range. So when we look at the first group there, 1, 2, and 3 hertz, this is the group that we call delta. And what we have discovered, particularly at 1 hertz, when it's showing us this dark blue, for example, that it is minimizing the effects of delta. And at 1 hertz, we know that we see this with people who are pretty advanced in their meditation, and they're making a very strong connection to the collective conscious. When we look at the next group going up, 3 through 8 hertz, that's what we call theta, and that's that twilight drowsy state where you're sort of awake and sort of asleep. It's one of our more creative states, but it also happens to be the gateway to our subconscious, and because this is all blue here, again, the same principle is involved where it's minimizing the effects of theta, allowing that information from the subconscious to come into our conscious awareness. And that's where we start to get down here into alpha. Alpha is 9, 10, 11, and 12 hertz. And so this is where we are in a relaxed state, but we have a lot of focus and our awareness is heightened. And so all this information coming in from the collective conscious or the morphogenic field and coming up from the subconscious comes into our conscious awareness by a heightened element of alpha. So at 12 hertz, we see kind of a unique thing there where that allows us to be more centered, and we are passively absorbing the information that we're receiving during these meditations. Also, 13 hertz has become very profound. We see that it not only promotes attention towards external stimulus, things that are coming in from the outside, but it's also one of our heightened learning frequencies where it's able to take a lot of the information coming in and begin to synthesize that or create a gestalt about it. We found that 18 to 20 hertz oftentimes will begin to create a euphoria, but the important part here is that it's connecting both visual and auditory structures so that we can have that internal experience that goes along. Some of the other information that we'll be looking at when we talk about coherence, and we still have a lot to learn about coherence. There are 2 general types where we see a lot of red and the information is very active. We call that a hyper-coherence. And then the other type on the right there, you see the blue, we call that a hypo-coherence. So we're not going to get too deep into that, but there are a couple of depictions. And there are some patterns that we see in these brain maps that we can really get a good idea of people's ability to be intuitive. And so there are certain patterns that stand out, but that's a topic for another day. So let's kind of get into some of this. And Dr. Joe, you can just jump in whenever you're ready. And
All right. Hey, Jeff?
Yeah.
Okay. So just to overview, for those people who are just learning about brainwave patterns, let's just simplify it for you. When you saw the QEEG maps 2 slides ago, and you saw that blue representing, in delta, representing your collective connection to the collective unconscious, what we're really saying is that's when the person has lowered the volume to their thinking brain. And in delta, that's pretty much when most people are asleep. So delta represents deep sleep. So if you see a turning down in our students in delta, it usually means that their analytical mind is shut off and their brain is actually connecting to the quantum field. That's kind of the interpretation that we're making. Theta really represents when your body is asleep, but your mind is awake. We call that mystical place between worlds. Now, if 95% of who you are by the time you're 35 years old is a set of subconscious programs in which your body has been trained to become the mind, then if your body is asleep and your mind is awake, it means that your body is no longer the mind. And that's pretty much where we have seen instantaneous change take place in people's bodies and in some mystical moments as well. Now, alpha represents when the inner world, your inner experience, your attention is more on your inner world than it is on your outer world. It's the imaginary realm. And when you close your eyes and you begin to eliminate all of the external stimulation in your environment, you remove the people and things and the place you have to go, and you put your body away. You're no longer moving it around to create experiences that produce emotions, and you're no longer thinking in linear time. When you get to that point where you're starting to pay attention to your inner thoughts, your brain is processing less sensory information from the environment, so the thinking neocortex tends to slow down and brainwave patterns slow down with it. Now, when a person begins to connect to the collective unconscious and they're starting to create more internal experiences, you'll see a heightening take place in alpha because that's where their attention is. And so they have to then begin to integrate that information into meaning. They have to make sense of what's happening to them. We love that because it represents then that something's happening in their inner world that they're paying attention to. Now, when you get above that alpha state and you go into beta, you'll see as we go through different people in some of our case histories, beta is pretty much when your attention is on your outer world, or your outer world is more real than your inner world. And we spend the majority of our time in beta. And as a matter of fact, people who are highly addicted to emotions have difficulty changing from beta brainwave patterns into alpha brainwave patterns because so much of their attention is connected to their external world. And why is that? Because the hormones of stress that are connecting you to your external world are there for a reason. If you are in emergency mode, you want to pay attention to your external environment. You want to put all of your attention on the people and things and everything out in your outer world because it's not a time to go within and create. It's not a time to become vulnerable. It's not a time for growth and repair and long-term building projects. It's a time for emergency, and there's a predator around the corner. So most people then live in different levels of beta. And the brain scans show what's called low-level beta, which is when you're relaxed and you're paying attention or you're learning something. And then you have mid-range beta. That's like if we were going to test you on this, on all the information that you're learning, your brain would perk up a little bit more. But then in high-range beta, that's pretty much way higher than mid-range and low-range beta. And that's when your brain is in a hyper-arousal state. And some people become so addicted to that hyper-arousal that their brain stays stuck in that pattern. And when they stay stuck in that pattern, you can see anything from OCD to PTSD. You can see anxiety and even depression, neuroses. That's because the brain is pretty much operating in an emergency mode, and the person is always trying to predict the future based on the past, and they're never in the present moment, and their brain begins to process information improperly. Now, when you move into elegant states in meditation, we want people to move from beta to alpha into a very coherent form of alpha, which Jeffrey will talk about in a minute, and then ultimately into that place, that twilight place between worlds, where they can begin to change their body or program their body by thought alone. So just kind of connecting some of the dots for Jeffrey, I want you to understand that we move up and down these brainwave patterns all the time. When you wake up in the morning, you go from delta to theta to alpha to beta. And when you go to bed at night, you drop down from beta to alpha to theta to delta. And you can begin to learn how to regulate these states if you begin to practice different levels of meditation. So I just wanted to inject that in there, Jeffrey, so that everybody's on the same page.
Well said. You know, there's a lot that we're beginning to understand in terms of things like subtle energy, and it was a conundrum for physicists for many years as they began to look at this thing called string theory and beginning to understand that there are different dimensions that go along with that mathematical equation. And we have been fortunate enough to, in some of this research, to capture things that were going on in brainwave patterns where people felt like they were experiencing an interaction with a being from a different dimension. And that's kind of the way they described it. And so I want to take a look at some of the brainwave patterns when that happens. This is one of one of our recent cases here, where that's how they explained it for us. And you see here, this is just normal EEG activity, nothing unusual about it. It just very coherent rhythms. It's just what you would expect to see in a normal, healthy individual. And then I'm going to walk you through a timeline here. So at the top of the page, you can see the time. So we're looking at 1 minute and 13 seconds into this meditation. And you can see that there are already some activity different from the normal activity there in different locations. They're just short bursts of energy that are happening. Well, let's kind of identify those. Here that we're looking at this red one there, the large, or the purple one above the red, you can see that activity is coming from a location that we call C4, and that would be dealing with sensory and motor function. So there's a start of a sense of activity going on. This one here is at T3, so language centers, comprehension is being activated more than normal. T4, which is the green one, you can see right underneath it, as this energy is activating some of those language centers, we get what we call emotional tonality. How do I feel about this? What does it mean to me? Is this a threat? Is it fun? Is it exciting? You know, so the brain is going to begin to take what it knows and put some emotional tonality to that. And along with that, we see this area that we call T5. So once they look at the emotional tonality, kind of have a little dialogue with themselves, they put some meaning construction. You know, here's what I'm going to interpret this as. And this becomes a very important part of that overall quantum of possibility, to be able to look at that and with the model that you have of reality and how the universe works. This is one of those pivot points in being able to exercise and change the meaning of what that is. Nothing has any meaning except the meaning that we give it. Then there's this stuff here at P4. We very often will see P4 when people are having some sort of profound learning, something, those aha moments that come along, or some great insights of, oh, I now see that clearly. I understand what that's about. And so they have a connection, and you see all of those things are at work here. Now let's take a look at the brain map. Remember the colors now, as we in terms of the standard deviations. So let's take a look at the first one here. Here's that P4 that we saw there, the profound learning. See that red dot? It's showing it that it's 3 standard deviation above what would be considered normal. You saw the spike there and what that means. Over here we have some of the language and comprehension stuff that's going on. Down here we see the T5 where the meaning construction is at work. And you see that's happening in the alpha band range, so that they are consciously aware of that information. And so you see those spikes once again there At 2 minutes and 14 seconds, we see a little more information coming into play. We move down the clock now at 6 minutes and 13 seconds, where we start to see this coming in waves now, that we have our cast of characters are all on stage, they're all performing and doing what they need to do within the brain, while the other parts of the brain, you can see, are still functioning in a very normal activity, but these particular locations are very important for the brain to do this. And like Dr. Joe was saying before, this is happening to the individual. They're not creating this, but they're in that quantum possibility. And Joe, feel free to jump in any time here if you have additional comments on these.
Sure. Just a couple things here. Well said. The acute EEG scan we just saw, we've all had this experience where you're in the middle of profound understanding and profound learning, and at the same time you're talking about it. You're saying, oh my God, this is the most amazing thing that's ever happened to me. And as you're beginning to construct a meaning behind it and understanding, your brain is actually consolidating that information neurologically. There are significant neuroplastic changes going on that are physically altering you, neurologically altering you, and genetically altering you. And so then in the next slide that Jeffrey just showed of the strip chart analysis, where you start to see the amplitude, the energy building in the brain is capturing a stream of consciousness, and it's interpreting that stream of consciousness into something. And it's happening to them in the present moment. In other words, their attention is completely caught up in the experience. And where your attention is where your energy is. And where your energy is where your attention is. So in that moment, the person is completely present with the internal experience. And it's that internal experience that's beginning to rewrite their program. So as the energy begins to build more, the person now has forgotten about the car they drive. They've forgotten about the pain in their back. They've forgotten about their father being an alcoholic when they grew up. The inner experience is redefining them. And as it begins to define them, they can't voluntarily make that happen to their brain, because as they begin to move into the present moment and they begin to open their heart and they begin to become heart-centered, they are now accessing a very vast field of information. And their brain is like a superconductor, the antenna that's picking up that data, and it's downloading it neurologically in their brain. And that experience will cause them to view reality differently, because they're going to have more circuitry to see things differently because they're physically changed by that event. Go ahead, Jeff.
All right, so let's move ahead in time here. And we're into this meditation at 19 and a half minutes there. And the thing that you should notice, see the area there where meaning construction is taking place. You see we have these big delta waves that are going on there. And so there is a lot of profound information that's taking place. And we're going to see this build and come in waves here. You see now the entire symphony is playing. And so the experience at this point for the individual is becoming very, very real and very profound, as you see these different levels of activity in the brain waves, compared to normal activity. And it just continues to heighten. So now we're at 21 minutes, so 3 minutes into that part of the experience. This individual is now, it's almost getting to the point beyond what we can physically measure with the electronic equipment on this. Let's go a little bit further, and you see now the end of the first wave, a lot of that major activity giving the brain a little bit of a rest. It's still processing some of that stuff, the profound learning, the big spikes there in the red, that's the P4. And so take a look at that. This is sensory information, motor function here. That's the profound learning that the individual is experiencing. Down here, the meaning construction having that has become a very real situation. You see the amplitudes are a little bit lower than they were in the previous slide, allowing that to come down to where the individual can process that information. So again, this is that T5, the meaning construction, and you notice that it's happening at 1 and 2 hertz there. So that information is really coming in from the collective unconscious, the morphogenic field, the interaction that's going on there. And so here we see that again, where that's happening at. All right, so now we move a little further in the timeline. Another wave of information coming in. The brain has done a little bit of a reset. It's ready for more information, new experience, the things that are beginning to happen in this. And now we start to get very intense with all of this. And you see, this is happening over about a 7-minute period. And here, we see that the information seems to be very, very profound. Well, it's even more profound here. So, what are the limits of the human brain? There are things that are happening beyond what we can measure here. But it gives us a really good sense that this person is having a very real experience. You see now 29 minutes in, things are settling down. The information is allowing the person to physically, mentally, and emotionally process that they have just experienced. And then we see the cycle starting all over again, more information coming in, the waves get bigger, more energy, more activity going on in the brain. And so whatever the information that's being processed, whatever the experience is happening, we see, and this is very consistent when people are having these, that we see this coming in waves like this, and it reaches a crescendo, and then that goes on for, sometimes we've seen that happen for a period of just a few seconds, and then other times we've seen it happen over a period of several minutes. So we have one that went on for over 40 minutes, where the person was, and you would think that they would be going crazy or something, but they were experiencing this at such a high level that they experienced pure love or pure ecstasy or pure joy to a level that they had never experienced, in their physical life. Did you have anything you wanted to add to that, Dr. Joe?
Yes, Jeffrey, can you just speak about the amplitude of energy that you're seeing in these last 3 slides that you showed? Because I think it's important for people to understand what that amplitude means. When you see those huge spikes, what does that mean to you as a neuroscientist?
Yeah, Mark, if you bring that back up for me there, thanks. When we look at, let's see, yeah, I've got my pointer here. You can see this goes full scale here. And normal brain waves, you can see these are normal amplitudes that we measure those in what we call microvolts squared. And so this here would be a normal amplitude. You can see the difference here. This is probably about 15 times normal energy. And if let me go back to this one here. This would be purely speculation because it's going so far off the scale. We may be 20 or 30 times the energy that we are, that would be above normal. That's purely a speculation because we have no way to accurately measure it with the electronics that we have, but we know that the amplitude is a lot of energy, and yet there doesn't seem to be any deleterious effects from this high level of energy other than the person having the ability to process that information at a level that they never could have processed before.
So Jeff, let me ask, do you typically see that in a clinical setting?
Almost never.
Okay.
You know,
And would
if
you
we were
say
to see
that,
this in the
I
clinical,
mean, the premise that we use in the workshops that we do is that everybody has access to information, that we have on some level a connection to the quantum field, we have a connection to the collective unconscious, and the more we have filters and beliefs and perceptions and limited attitudes and past experiences, it kind of blocks our connection to source. So then people then tend to rely on things outside of them to change their inner state. But when a person like this is having an inner experience that is so real, we would say then they're so caught up as a consciousness in the present moment that when there's a shift in consciousness, there should be a shift in energy. And if there is a shift in energy, the brain should be able to track the experience of that shift in energy, and there should be information that the brain is processing in that moment, but that information is not going to be within the normal sensory experience of material reality. It's going to be something outside of material reality that should change the person's biology, for the most part, permanently, or at least change their biology to rewrite their past experience.
yeah, I would agree with that completely, because I think what we see when things like this are happening and why it comes in waves is that it's expanding our tuner's ability to access that information. So if we look at the average person and their brain processes from 1 hertz all the way up to 60 hertz, well, their life experiences are going to take place within that framework. But when we see large amounts of energy that's happening in the brain and processing of information, new dendrites are being formed, new pathways are being developed. The tuner is actually being refined, if you will, so that the people can then experience these things as part of their normal context. So instead of their tuner only being able to measure from 1 to 60 hertz, now they can measure from, say, 1 to 100 hertz. And there's a big difference there in how much of the broadcast that you're able to pick up.
Exactly. So then your nervous system tunes up, it becomes enriched, and then the next time you interact with the field, you have more antennas or more resources to be able to connect. And I like this understanding because I think it helps us to look at the idea that that person who's having that inner experience, who's engaged in that moment, the higher the energy, the faster the manifestation in reality. The slower the energy, the more matter the person is, and the longer it takes to occur in physical time. So we have had people in these moments for example, someone with an amplitude similar to this could have uterine fibroids and could be bleeding consistently during their menstrual cycle. And after an inner experience like that, their bleeding stops permanently because it's the electromagnetism, the energetic quotient that the nervous system is processing that begins to heal the body in a moment. And so receptor sites on the outside of the cells are 100 times more sensitive to electromagnetism than they are to chemistry. So once the cell is enlivened with new information from the field, then there's a possibility that in a matter of moments, there's a change in protein expression, a change in the genetic expression, and a change in health that happens instantaneously. So the bigger the amplitude, the higher the energy, the more it happens in time quicker. The slower the amplitude, the more matter we are, and the longer it takes to occur. So that person is having a transcendent moment, and it's happening to them in that moment, and it's producing effects, and matter becomes the downward causation of consciousness. It becomes a downward causation of energy. And it can happen in a moment because they are literally thought in that moment that's transcendent of their biology.
Yeah, I think another thing that's really important to talk about at this juncture is when that energy is coming in and the brain is literally being transformed to handle that kind of energy, it's a little bit like most people have a laptop and they have a plug that they plug in the wall to get the energy, and there's a little box usually that takes that voltage down to what the computer can handle. If you were to simply cut out that box and rewire the plug and put it back in the wall, what would happen? It would fry the computer because the systems within the computer are not adept at handling voltages at that level. Well, the brain would be the same way, and so this process of meditation and transforming is very important to allow the brain to create those elements, new dendrites, new neural pathways, new receptor sites, to allow all of that to take place so that the individual can handle this information. And I think that's why it comes in waves, and why we see, you know, small amplitudes building to higher and higher amplitudes, so that the individual's brain, their processor, if you will, to be able to handle that level of information. And once it's created, then that becomes more of a normal experience for that individual as they practice in their meditation and allow for the possibilities.
Excellent, excellent, beautiful.
All right, let's kind of wind up on this particular one. Here's something I think that's important to look at when we look at this area of T4, that we're talking about emotional tonality, where the brain is going to take the experience and look at that and put some things into there. So at T4, that emotional tonality is happening. You see from the timeline, things are beginning to wind down with this individual, allowing some homeostasis or normalizing of brainwave activity to begin to occur. But we still see here 1 minute and 38 seconds after this event started that they're still processing at C4, which is the sensory motor information. And so it's still having an effect on the person's brain. It's quite astounding. You see the rest of the brain has now gone back to some of its normal activity. Here's another person who had a very intense learning process. So again, we look at the normal brainwave activity of this individual and see where it goes. In the first, you know, here we are just 7 minutes into the meditation, and you can already see a high level of activity. Well, why does that happen? Well, this individual has had many of these experiences, so the brain is actually going from normal activity to very high activity. You see these vertical lines here, that's 1 second of time. So from normal activity, we go 1, 2, and at the beginning of second 3, each one of those is 1 second, we see very high amplitude. So this tells me that this person's brain is capable of handling high amounts of information very quickly, and so they haven't been meditating for a very long period of time at this to have that higher amplitudes occurring. So we're seeing on their brain map, you see all of the blue there is very interesting, where it is essentially minimizing the effects of anything going on in the frontal lobes. And then the red at 2, 3, those are delta frequencies, and 4 hertz, which is a theta frequency. That's where that activity is coming in. When we look at their coherence, we see the same thing. Very high coherence, so the brain is in a very coherent state in delta, which is up here, and theta, which is right here. And the rest of it, it goes into a hypocoherence in order to minimize the amount of activity, because it all needs to happen up here in delta and theta. So as we look at that particular element here, this is that person's brain, and we had looked at this, as should look very familiar to you from what we had seen before, where the individual was in the deep meditation. We were explaining what delta does, what theta, what alpha, and so on does. in these different locations in the brain, just to refresh your memory a little bit here. T6, this is where the emotional content happens. It's going to also engage the amygdala. The amygdala is that part of our brain. It deals with a lot of our emotions. It detects what emotions are it needs to deal with in the moment, also deals with that element of fight or flight. And then when we're dealing with that emotion, it also is taxing on the subconscious. So this part up here is the conscious thinking part of the brain, the cortex, and down here we would call this the subcortical regions of the brain, or the subconscious. But some of that energy is dealing with stuff down here. Now, remember, it's been noted in many magazine books and articles that our brain up here, the thinking cortex, processes at about 40 bits per second, whereas the subcortical regions down here will process at 40 million bits per second. So 95% of everything we say, think, and do, and feel, so on, happens down here, and only 5% of it happens up here. So we see that kind of information going on here. Again, the emotional content, the amygdala, things at F4 where we've got spatial and object retrieval. It's you know, putting it in perspective. There's some element of vigilance going on there, and then F4 deals with a lot of our selective and sustained attention, where the brain has to decide what it's going to attend to and how long it's going to attend to that. And then our old friend here at T5 that deals with meaning construction. So let's go back and kind of relate that back here. So here's the F4. You can see that object retrieval, information, vigilance, selective and sustained attention. We have that activity going on there. Yeah, the gold in between the green and the blue there, that's what the T5 that we're pointing to, dealing with the meaning construction. And then the blue is the emotional content, the amygdala kicking in, evaluating what emotions it needs to deal with, in what order and in what intensity, in all of that. So you can see that now 12 minutes and 53 seconds into the meditation, we're going to start to see this coming in waves. So a minute later, we see more intensity going on there. You know, the whole orchestra is now tuned up and ready to do its thing. We take about a 30-second breather there where the brain goes back into normal activity, and then boom, it's right back, you know, almost instantaneously going from this state of being to activating more information that's going on there. So we just see this happening over and over again. So we got new cast members here on this particular element, where we see FP1 and FP2, which are in the right on the forehead there. It's increasing the frontal coherence, and we saw that coherence earlier, and this is where that's actually happening. F7 is that location that deals with some of our working memory and activating both visual and auditory constructs, so that it's taking the information, increasing the coherence, being able to put that into some context in the working memory of what should I do with this, how should I feel about it, and visually having some relationship to it, as well as any sights, sounds, or other auditory functions in the brain to record this construct that's happening. Then we look at F8 down here. You see those wavy lines beginning to occur, creating what we call a spatial and visual gestalt. Now, some of you may not be familiar with that word. So a gestalt is a principle that, as human beings, it helps us to make sense out of our world. And so that anything that's going on, the objects, we see them in their entirety before we look at the component parts, or in parallel with or perception of those individual parts. And so what it's really suggesting to us is that the whole is other than the sum of its parts. So this learning and the information that's coming there is for the individual to get that aha moment, the greater understanding of what's happening in the brain. And so that part of the brain, the F8 that's creating that gestalt, becomes pretty important in that. Did you have anything you wanted to add there?
Just one element, and if you think about the brain divided into halves, the right hemisphere, in some of the latest research, really is processing what we call cognitive novelty. When you're experiencing an unknown, something new, your right brain tends to be more activated. When you experience something very nonlinear, something very holistic, your right brain is getting the whole picture. So this person is getting a huge download of information, and they're getting an understanding that transcends words. And that's probably the best way to say it. And the emotional quotient that comes along with it is so relevant that it's imprinting as a long-term memory into her brain. The moment that occurs, there's a moment where you could experience a little vigilance or a little concern because it's so outside of what's familiar to you. But if you hang in with it long enough, you'll begin to have some understanding or some learning, and you're going to see that lateralize to the left hemisphere, which processes cognitive routine or understands it in a more linear fashion. And so you're going to see a lot of this kind of jumping around in the brain as this person is capturing an amazing moment for herself. And then you're going to see some coherence in the frontal lobe because her attention is going to improve dramatically, and it's going to help her to understand exactly what happened even more. So it's a great way to look at how the brain tells a story. And Jeffrey's an expert in, like a detective, telling the story of the physical evidence along with what the person is experiencing, because if you heard some of the stories of some of these people when they're having that transcendent moment, they struggle for words a lot because it is such a novel moment that's outside of what they know. It's so outside of the paradigm of how we process data in a linear way, on a moment-to-moment basis, that sometimes it takes them quite a long time, sometimes weeks or months, to be able to find the words, to be able to integrate the experience into their neurological architecture. And we want people to have those moments. We actually want them to have them consistently, because it's those moments like this person that she's experiencing. She could never go back to business as usual. She could never go back to being the same person, because that experience is now a long-term effect. I mean, it's a long-term memory. It has long-term effects for her.
Great. Alexi just handed me a note here saying that we need to kind of do a little summation here. There's a lot of people who have questions and would like to dialogue with us about those questions. So perhaps if you want to do a summary statement. We have so many cases that we would love to share with you, and I'm sure that there will be other opportunities where we can share those. And in Dr. Joe's book, You Are The Placebo, you'll be able to take a look at some of those, and he describes them so eloquently in the new course that we are recording on the brain mapping certification course. There'll be more cases like that. There'll be other webinars that we'll be able to release some of this work, but you can see it is not just a casual event that we happen to capture, but we get more and more and more. And you know, to date, we've done over 700 brain maps, and we have a plethora, is the only word I can use for that, of cases and information that we continue to sort through as we look at not only brain patterns, but heart and brain coherence. You know, how does epigenetics play into some of that stuff? So we have a lot of work cut out for us, but work is not really the word. It's the love of what Dr. Joe and I do, and being able to be on the cutting edge of all of this and present information. It's wonderful that Quantum University has these kind of facilities and the number of people who can join with us. and learn about this.
Yeah, I'd just like to add that the course that we're creating, the neuroscience course that we're creating for Quantum University, is really going to give you the foundation of understanding how the brain works, how the mind works. You'll understand neuroplasticity, you'll understand how to read brain scans, and you'll understand how to interpret data. But we're going to take this to the next level because we want the uncommon to become common for the average person. And so we're looking for, after this course, you know, graduate students that want to work with us and interpret some of the data and get hands-on experience of what we're doing. And you'll have to be certified in understanding the basics in order to be able to partner with us. You know, You Are The Placebo basically says you're already the thing that you want to create, that you're everything that you seek to become. It's already there. And that we love the idea of giving people all the tools to begin to see that they can really transcend some of the conditions in their body and in their life. And so we have gone to great measures, Jeffrey and I, in working long hours to be able to simplify the understandings. But I think, to summarize for me, these are not normal brain scans. These are outside of conventional norms. These people don't have psychoses. They don't have mental problems. This is what happens when you move out of the predictable timeline that we live in. That so much of our energy is siphoned off as a resource when we are living in linear time, trying to predict the future based on the past. And if we're living by the stress hormones that most people pretty much survive with, then for the most part, most people really are experiencing a separation from the quantum field because we become materialists, trying to define reality through our senses. When we get beyond our senses and we begin to really access greater information, which you and I are readily have access to, that's when you begin to see these wonderful and abnormal changes that begin to take place. So You Are The Placebo, the book that I wrote that's coming out, shows some brain scans of some simple cases. I'm already, and Jeffrey and I are already way beyond that because we've had an advanced workshop in February, which was probably the greatest event that I personally participated in. And we captured even more abnormal experiences, and we could show several more brain scans, but we're giving you a taste to give you an idea of what we're doing and how it all works. So we'll open it up for questions, and hopefully we can make sense of all of this for you.
Thank you very much for this. And obviously, you know, we're missing time here because I can see the PowerPoint was way more longer. And this is why we have all these other class where you can pursue your study in this subject. As I like to remind, we have this class with Dr. Dispenza, brain and neuroplasticity, and now we are putting together this new program of certification, brain mapping and neurofeedback. But when you were speaking, I was thinking about, you know, how we have evolved since 1990, where Deepak Chopra started to speak about the quantum healing and quantum medicine. They were speaking about the spontaneous healing, like kind of a, you know, mysterious and, you know, event, and not necessarily easy to repeat. And then Dr. Goswami came along and started to lay out, you know, the foundation of what we call today quantum creativity, step by step. You know, with this, how we can speak about, you know, spontaneous healing and all the stage. And then he go in this idea of a brain circuit, which is, I would say, another concept. But now we are, I will say, in the real business of what is, you know, spontaneous healing, how to understand what we call today the neuroplasticity, and what is this event where some individual can absolutely reverse a chronic condition, or, you know, what medicine sometimes define as almost impossible to heal. And it's very enlightening to see, you know, that we have this tool, which is the brain mapping, to understand that. And I'm sure, you know, when we were doing the program, many people will say, oh, I would like to know more about brain mapping and understand how to interpret this. I would like to have this tool in my practice, because many of our practitioners or doctors, you know, they are also doing all kind of practice, and they like to I would say document what's going on in their practice and go deeper in the understanding. So now today it's possible. We are putting together this training, which is more than a training. It's a certification in in brain mapping and neurofeedback certification. And I would like maybe you comment a little bit about it, Dr.
Sure. Yeah, this has been a desire of mine for many, many years, to be able to have the technology and make it available. And it's so wonderful for us to be able to do that with Quantum University, because it really gets to the heart of what Quantum University is all about, and being able to have this process where people can learn. So we have a number of different elements that you're going to learn in the course, so in Dr. Dispenza's portion, there's about 12 hours of information that gets into the brain and neuroplasticity. Beyond that, I'm going to have about all of these different topics that we're going to discuss, basic neurophysiology, neuroanatomy, advanced. That's one of the reasons that I'm here in Hawaii, is to record all of these segments, and then we put this course together, and people will also have to do a 2-day course for hands-on to learn about that. This is the logo. We're getting the website finished and operating, so don't try to go there yet. It's about a week away from launching that, and but brain mapping, brain training certification is now going to be a reality for people.
So we have still so many things to speak about, but I see all the questions now, and this 2-hour program this morning should have been probably 4 hours. You know, you will need another extra hour.
I think we could go for days on this topic.
Yeah. So don't be frustrated if you. We cannot cover all the questions because I have so many of them here. We'll try to do as much, and I've guessed, of course, you know, we will have other opportunity coming, like we will speak a little bit more about it in the next hour, the next minute, the World Congress and other course. But here's a question of Jackie Brooke. What I hear Dr. Joe saying is that it is up to us to decide what this will help us with. So I think it's a good question here. This, you know, when you think about, you know, the mind cannot fix the mind, I think you can comment that, I'm sure, Dr. Joe.
Well, this is when you're dealing with subjective mind, everybody has their own experience of reality, and everybody is pretty much at their own level of understanding. The placebo response actually works, according to the research that I've done, anywhere between 10% up to 100% of different scientific tests. So when there is trauma from past experiences, when there is high levels of stress, when there's self-destructive habits, when there's unconscious thought processes that are pretty much running like a computer program, and the majority of people are spending their life distracted from all these states of mind and body because they're so caught up in the reality. They're on a specific genetic timeline, and the effects of their genetic timeline will be equal to the genes that are signaled during those high stress periods. So then when you begin to make the change, the first element, of course, is becoming conscious of your unconscious thoughts, beginning to become aware of the automatic behaviors and habits, and notice the emotions that keep you connected to the past, and then ask if you like doing those things or thinking that way or feeling that way, and do those elements that are really just imprints from the past belong into your future. Now, crossing that river of change from the old self to the new self takes a little bit of will. In other words, typically we don't waltz from one state of mind into another. It takes time. And when we're no longer thinking the same way, we're no longer acting the same way, we're no longer feeling the same way, the moment that occurs, we don't feel like ourselves. We feel uncomfortable. It feels unfamiliar. Now, most people don't understand that that's the biological, the neurological, the chemical, the addictive, hormonal, even genetic death of the old self. That is the old self biologically changing. Now, most people step into that void, that place that's uncertain and unknown, and because they can't predict their future, even if it's they're no longer feeling like themselves, they're not feeling guilty, they're not feeling judgmental, they're not doing the same things that create the same experiences, that produce the same conditioned reward, whether they're smoking or whatever it is. That's the moment that they're like an addict going through a withdrawal. And so most people don't trust in the unknown. They don't believe that they can create a future. So they begin to make the same choices as they did the day before, which leads to the same behaviors that create the same experiences and produce the same emotions. And then they say, this feels right. Well, it feels familiar. And so crossing the river of change from the old self to the new self does require, for certain people, a certain amount of time. We have had people that were facing genetic disorders that medical science had no solution for, that had a very juvenile onset condition, and it took them over a year, maybe 2 years for certain people. Other people had genetic conditions, hormonal genetic conditions, that were supposed to be drug dependent for the rest of their lives. And because they had a gene switched on because of the hormones of stress, they had to say to themselves, I've created this condition, I should be able to uncreate it. So then each individual, it took them different amounts of time, different intensity of focus and concentration, and they had to continuously go every single day and take the placebo every day. In other words, the person who's taking the placebo for depression, and they're taking an antidepressant, and they're given a sugar pill, they have to take that placebo every single day to remind them that they're getting better. Well, what we ask our students to do is, you don't need a sugar pill or a saline injection or a sham surgery. You can move into elegant states of being by thought alone. And you should be able then, every single day, like taking the placebo, begin to change your state of being with a clear intention and an elevated emotion. Now, there is going to be a void where nothing happens, and this is where people become impatient, this is where they become uncertain, where they don't believe it's possible, and they give up. And the people who continue on and continue to do it create the experience of transformation. And they always say the same thing, it was always so worth it. My disease became my greatest teacher. And one of the things that we noticed that in reading so many different testimonials over the years of people healing themselves of all kinds of conditions, is there comes a moment where people become so whole and so satisfied with who they are that they no longer care if they have their disease. In other words, I feel so great that I don't really care if I have cancer. I don't really care if I have a disorder. The moment they get to that point is the moment that the healing takes place. We've seen it over and over again. So then most people have been conditioned into believing that once they are healed, then they'll feel whole. Once they are abundant, then they'll feel free. Once they have a loving relationship, then they'll feel love and appreciation. Once they are successful, they'll feel empowered. Once they have a mystical experience, they'll feel awe. And what we teach our students is that you actually have to experience that. You have to experience the emotion before the event occurs, because your body, as the unconscious mind, begins to believe it's in that future experience in the present moment, and that's when you begin to signal new genes in new ways. So if you do it every day, and it takes you a year, because just like taking the placebo, you have to continue to change your state of being, then people will cross that river at different degrees and at different times. But usually, when they begin to make the changes, they start to see feedback in their life. And once you can correlate the change that's happening outside of you, or you're something changing in your body, you'll correlate what you're doing inside of you and keep doing it over and over again. And we've seen people do it consistently. So there's different degrees, and becoming conscious of the unconscious self, I think, is the first step.
Yes, thank you very much. And, you know, I like to comment on that because this is it's probably at the core of what I will say in medicine, not only quantum medicine, medicine in general. Every healer, every practitioner, doctors, you know, they have to deal most of the time with habits. And this is a habit of thinking, eating, and it's probably the resistance, you know, about, you know, reversing any disease or medical situation. And I know this as a family doctor, you know, in the past, of course, you know, you all the time, everybody's expecting for the miracle, but sooner or later you realize that, you know, something has to change here. And this is what we are speaking about. And how precious is this information? I think this is kind of a cornerstone now to infuse the healthcare business with this new mind of thinking, new mind of setup, where we have in hands what I call a medicine of infinite possibility. This is what we are speaking about. You know, we are really shifting a paradigm. And but for years, people will say, "Oh, it's not scientific. It's not taught in university." But now, from what we heard this morning, we're putting the foot on the floor, right?
Yes, that's true.
There is a science behind it, and neuro feedback, brain mapping, it's a very solid ground to open the window, I would say, or the eyes to what we are familiar in conventional medicine.
One thing we have to understand about that is it's only a tool to help us get this information, that we already have everything we need inside of us, like Dr. Joe so eloquently explains in all of his books and in his lectures and so forth, that this is only a tool, a way to measure some of this stuff, that we already have everything we need.
Yeah, and now
behind that is really simple, and that is that once you can see your brain map, you know, when you see your brain in action, you see your brain at work, that's called mind. Mind is what the brain does. So then if you can see your brain map and understand what's happening to you, that's more information for you to pay attention to what you're doing and keep doing it, or change what you're doing and do it better. And so there's nothing wrong with conventional medicine. Conventional medicine is excellent in treating acute conditions. I mean, they're the best at it. And in our country and several Western world countries, acute care is really become something that's really become sophisticated and excellent. But with chronic conditions require a change in lifestyle. Chronic conditions require a change in behavior. Chronic conditions require a re-understanding of the choices that people are making. And if you have three types of stress that are physical, chemical, and emotional, and stress is what knocks your brain and body out of balance, then there's three ways to create balance back in your body: physically, chemically, and emotionally. And one of the key elements is that the majority of people that walk into a healthcare facility in the Western world walk in there because of a psychological or emotional stress disorder. As a matter of fact, it's 9 out of 10. So teaching people how to regulate their emotional states, teaching people how to shorten the refractory period of their emotional reactions, teaching people how to manage their inner world of emotions and thoughts, teaching people how to become more heart-centered and lay down the very thing they use their whole life to get what they want for something greater to occur, is what the new paradigm of healthcare should be talking about on a daily basis, because people want to hear that. They don't want to hear that they need another drug. They don't want to hear that they need something outside of them. They want to begin to make the right choices and begin to be educated in the right way so that they can move their brain and body back towards balance and become less dependent on things outside of them and more dependent on themselves.
Yeah, thank you. And you know, we could pursue this conversation. I see other question, but you realize how important it was to lay out this information in our curriculum in Quantum University. Here is another question. It's refer also about, you know, there is a collectivity out there of thinkers, researchers, scientists that are really digging in this idea of quantum physics and quantum medicine. And Tom Gerzep, you know, if I say well his name, is there any connection between your work and the work of Nissim Haramein regarding the united field theory? I don't know if you're familiar with
Yeah, I'm a little bit familiar with Nassim's work, and there are some general areas that overlap in terms of quantum physics, but the things that we're doing and measuring here are quite a bit different than what he's doing.
I would say that theoretically speaking, Nassim's understanding of the unified field is what our students pretty much engage in. What we're interested in is the practical application. We're interested in having people experience that field. We're interested in having them interact with information. We want them to have a moment where the internal experience is so real that they understand the philosophical, scientific, theoretical experience as an experience that they've had within them. So I'm not a person that likes to argue semantics. I'm not a person that likes to spend a lot of time any longer arguing different principles in quantum physics. What I'm interested in is teaching people how to do it, how to begin to bridge that gap. And I think it's a time in history where it's not enough to know. I think it's a time in history to know how. And I could say that in the last 10 years, in my travels around the world, more and more people are interested in learning how to do it, learning how to have the experience, learning how to understand what this field is about and begin to close that gap. So I don't want to get caught up in the semantics, but I will say that there are similarities. My interest more appropriately is really about personally is having the interaction and having people experience the philosophical understanding.
Yeah, and sometimes I take the example, you know, an orchestra need a lot of players, and of course everyone put the spotlight in different interests. Here's, of course, Quantum University is about healing, and this is, you know, where we are so interested in your work, Dr. Fannin and Dr. Joe Dispenza. I have so many questions here. One is from L.K. Carmen, and she said, I am becoming very sensitive after meditation. I do the meditation twice a day, in the morning and in the evening. Can it be too much? I like this question because in some way there is, of course I'm also a meditator, and there's so many ways to experience what we're speaking about. But what you are speaking about, Dr. Joe, is kind of a very specific approach, right? Do you want to comment about that?
I'll just say this. I think meditation is real. There's so many benefits of meditation. You can talk about how it increases cortical gray matter. You can talk about how it reduces cortisol levels and stress hormones and increases DHEA levels. You know, we can talk about all the benefits of brain coherence. And that's all great because it teaches people mindfulness and metacognition. And if people use meditation to actually center themselves, to open their heart, and to find the present moment, and then to create a reality or to create a future, then I don't see any problem with that. If you're using meditation to escape from reality because you have problems in your life that you don't want to confront, or you don't want to engage in choices that you have to make in your life, then that's an escape that's just like using anything to escape from reality that people use, whether it's an addiction or whatever, a habit or whatever. So the meditations that we like to use is really based on science, it's based on brainwave technology, it's based on epigenetics, it's based on neuroplasticity. And what we like to say is that you can't get up from your meditation the same person who sat down. If you get up as the same person who sat down, then nothing's really happened in the quantum field. Nothing's happened biologically, neurologically, epigenetically. But if you get up as a enlivened sense of self, and you feel empowered, if you feel more courageous, you feel more invincible, you feel more possibility, well, now your brain and body have just moved from living in the past to living in the future. So if you do meditation twice a day, and you do it in the morning to get your brain and body right and to change your energy, and then you do it in the evening to give thanks for your day and to review how you did and where you may have fallen from grace, I think that's a healthy approach. I mean, and that's kind of what I do. So if you do that properly then, and you change your state of being, then your job is to stay conscious the rest of your day. Your job is to maintain that modified state of mind and body your entire day so that you're able to walk into that experience that you created. You can't move into a state of joy or gratitude and then 20 minutes later, after your meditation, be angry and frustrated with everybody because now you're at arm's distance from your creation. You have to maintain that state. And those people that we showed you, just 2 case histories of the people that we showed you, their inner experience being more real than any past outer experience, I can guarantee you that those people, the experience created an emotional reaction inside of them that turned into a mood, that turned into a temperament, and ultimately became part of their personality. That's when they're in the process of transformation. So we love people to do meditation. We love them to disconnect and retreat from their known physical world so that their personal reality isn't creating their personality, but their personality is beginning to have an effect on their personal reality. And if it takes retreating from your life twice a day to remind yourself of that, so be it. If it takes 3 times a day to remind yourself to do that, so be it. If it takes 5 times a day to keep yourself conscious and aware, then so be it. But if you're doing it for the right reasons, then you are actually engaging in the process of transformation, in the process of creation, in the process of change. If you're doing it to escape from your life because you don't want to engage in life, then you have to reconsider it. So there's no limit to the amount of meditation that you do. I have retreated from my life for days and stayed in that state till I've gotten beyond certain things. So I don't really have a judgment on how long you do it. It's just, or how many times you do it. It's just the reason or the intention behind it.
Yes, and of course, to experience this live with a group is also an adding factor. And I like to invite people for our Congress in October 6 to 9, where Dr. Joe will be there, Dr. Fannin. And the theme this year is mind over matter. And it's very important for us to this year, to make people experiencing. It's like experience and knowledge. This is what will be the Congress this year in Hawaii, Honolulu, October 6 to 9, where we will have a blend where, because, and Dr. Joe explained that, it's like you have to integrate information, so both will be there, and Dr. Joe will be there guiding the meditation and go in that space. Where he's speaking about, where you experience something, a dimension transcendent, where something is greater than you is taking over. And I can speak by experience. I went to this workshop, I went to this meditation, and I found, I was in the midst of this kind of a transcendent experience. And everyone has, of course, we are on different paths, and we have experienced different type of meditation all along the years, but, there's all the time a layer that we have to add to our experience, and be there live with these, mentor, and I would say pioneer, it's all the time enriching. So, and here is another question. Why you are not measuring the same energy spike in labs, and why in event the spike are there? Should this mean that when there are more brains in one room, there are a magnetic field? That's a very interesting question. The group effect, and this is a little bit what I was speaking about. Dr.
Well, I'll speak briefly about it, then I'll let Jeffrey talk about it. We don't only measure brainwave patterns in our advanced workshops. If you come to an advanced workshop, you may have your brain scanned before the event. You may have your brain scanned before and after the event. You may have your brain scanned during a meditation in real time. Those people that you saw, that was happening in real time to them. That's different data that we're collecting. Some people wear heart rate monitors, HRV monitors. We're measuring heart coherence with the HeartMath Institute, and we're partnering with Roland McCready and that team, and we've got some great measurements for people there. You may be peeing in a cup or spitting into a cup because we're measuring epigenetic changes, and we've seen some nice correlations with elevated oxytocin levels and decreasing cortisol levels during our workshops. You may have your energy fields measured, the field around your body. You may have the energy centers of your body read. All of this is more data for us to begin to gather. Now, when people have a collective consciousness, and we've measured the energy in the room 2 out of the 3 events that we've done, and we've seen significant changes in energy in the room. In other words, the energy has gone up, and it's not just something where someone's saying, oh, the energy's great in the room. No, we measured the energy because we wanted to see if that was actually the case. And 2 out of the 3 times that we measured it, there was a substantial change in energy. That means people went from particle to wave, from matter to energy. And so there should be a collective change where there's more energy in the room, which means there's more energy for us to use. So when we saw, after the second day, an increase in energy starting to take place, it became exciting because we started to see some coherent changes in people's brains. At the same time, we were seeing, I think there was, in the second advanced workshop we did, we saw collections of people move into heart coherence at the exact same time, on the exact same day, in the exact same meditation, for the exact same length of time. So now, if you're creating a magnetic field of coherence, and I'm sitting in your field, which probably is about 6 feet to 9 meters, to 2 meters to 9 meters wide, depending on the person, that's a lot of information that you have access to. That's a heart-centered field. And if I'm in your field, there's going to be a collective coherence that's created. There's going to be an entrainment. In other words, things are going to start to move in rhythm, and I'm going to feed off your field. And if we get enough people doing that, we're going to create one big field of coherent information. That's my passion. That's my intention. So we've seen changes in heart coherence at specific time intervals. We've seen changes, significant changes, in that type of brain spiking that's occurred with more and more people. And as the weekend goes on, we collect more and more data on it because more and more people are having those experiences because the door is open. And we see more and more broader energy fields around people's bodies because we're measuring that as well. So I think that you'll see more of a collective coherence created. And the cool part about it all is that I love the idea of when people have that experience and it begins to build and more people stand up during the event and talk about a healing that they've had or some type of transformation, and then you begin to give yourself permission to have the same experience. So we're creating a very strong morphogenic field. The experience then, right during the event, is information that then begins to be implanted into the quantum field that now someone else has access to because everything in the field is information. So if you have the experience of healing and you've transcended something or you created a mystical moment and that's imprinted into the field and it's in a collective field, then you have more access to be able to draw from it. And I think we've seen enough measurements to say that it's contagious at this point and it becomes more and more consistent.
Well, I think that the measurements we've taken, when you look at how long it takes a person to get into a meditative state and sustain that, the averages are about 1.5 minutes. And what we've seen in these events, because of the energy and the morphogenic field, the interaction that's going on, that average tends to drop down to about 59 seconds. And so the people are able to get into a meditative state much quicker than they normally would. So I think one of the explanations for that is that energy and the collective energy and the interaction of that energy within the morphogenic field is allowing them to access their resources within themselves at a higher rate.
Yes, and of course it's this collective effect that we are also very shared here at Quantum University. We call that the quantum family. I see the time is just flying here. I have another one, and it's another important question. It's about you know, genetics and modern medicine now is probably going in one direction, and what we are finding in these seminar and in your research, you know, it's completely opposite. You know, there is way to, and as you discussed, Dr. Joe, way to modify, alter the DNA. So the question here is from Shell: is it possible to change the hardware programs that have been handed down through the DNA from generation past?
Well, I think that certain genes are more hardwired than others. In other words, your eye color is a genetic expression, and that's a little bit more difficult to change than, say, upregulating a gene that has to do with cancer suppression. So I think that genes are a parts list of potentials. They're a library of potentials, and that the gene can be variant in about 35 different variations on a single gene based on the information that the cell processes. Now, in order for a gene to be turned on or a gene to be activated, when a gene is activated, it's making a protein. Proteins are responsible for the structure and function of your body. So if you're interpreting your reality from the same level of mind every single day, and you're not having any new experiences, and the end product of experiences are feelings and emotions, then for the most part, you're headed for your genetic destiny because there's no new information that the gene is receiving. There's no new signal outside the cell. If you're able to then create something in your future, and you can signal the gene ahead of the actual experience, that new emotional state can literally turn on or signal new genes to begin to upregulate for, well, health and repair, and begin to downregulate the genes that are responsible for tumor formation or stress response or cortisol levels. And so we're always upregulating and downregulating genes on a moment-to-moment basis. And you can think of genes like in the DNA like Christmas tree lights. Combinations of different genes are activated at different moments. But if you're not changing anything about you personally, and you're not being your own genetic engineer, then for the most part, if you keep the same gene signaling the same information over and over again, just like the gears in a car, you begin to wear the gene out and you start to make cheaper proteins, proteins that don't have the efficacy that they normally would. So then we've seen, well, for example, we had a person that had a cancerous condition that came to our advanced workshop. He had zero white blood cells when he came to the event, and he went through, and his doctors told him, look, you shouldn't travel, you could develop an infection, and you could die in a matter of days. But he took the risk and he came to the event, and he began to signal new genes in new ways during that event because that was one of the things we did. And in a very short amount of time, by the time he returned back to his home and he had his blood analyzed, he was producing enormous amounts of white blood cells. Now, that means then that he was creating a different emotional state where growth and repair are more important than emergency. He's moved out of fear and he moved into a nurturing state. And it was his emotional state that began to select different stem cells to begin to morph into the proper white blood cells to fight his condition. And his tumors are shrinking now, and he feels a whole lot better. But it's not so much like can you change those genes. What you want to do is you want to change the gene expression. So you could have the gene for Alzheimer's, but if the gene isn't expressed, that's just because that information hasn't been activated. So it's not about the gene that you carry, it's about the expression of that gene, and you're the genetic engineer that controls that.
Thank you, and I see the time is just flying, and I'd like to absolutely underline what will be our next experiment here on the Quantum World TV. Of course, you know, Quantum University is very excited about all this research done by Dr. Joe and Dr. Fannin, because as I said, we are exactly in the core of the business of new brain circuits, spontaneous healing. But we are preparing an event, an absolutely extraordinary event coming, called the Healing Intention Experiment with Lynn McTaggart. This is an event live, worldwide. We're expecting, you know, thousands and thousands of people. And the question would be about an intention to heal a human being. This is the first time, you know. There was Dr. Lynn McTaggart previously done an intention experiment with a different target, like world peace and on. But now we're speaking about, you know, an intention. You know, thousands of people will join this event to heal a human being. And I think we have a little video to play. Yeah, let's go.
Hi, my name is Lynn McTaggart. I'm author of The Field, The Bond, and The Intention Experiment. And I'm also architect of the Intention Experiment itself, which is a global laboratory inviting readers of mine from all over the world to take part in what is the largest mind over matter experiment in history. We've run 26 of these so far with very prestigious scientists in universities like the University of Arizona and University of California, St. Petersburg University, and each time we've tried to tackle a target that has philanthropic implications. We've made food grow faster. We've demonstrated the ability of thought to purify water. We've even lowered violence in war-torn areas. Each time I run an intention experiment, I ask my readers to come on my website and take part, sending intention together. So what we're really looking at is the power of group thought. And it's been my experience over these 25 experiments that lots of people thinking the same thought at the same time has more power than thought generated singly. The other interesting thing about the intention experiment is the effect on the participants. What we find is, and we've surveyed our participants who have come from 90 countries around the globe, we find that they feel a palpable sense of oneness when they're sending intention together to some target. They feel like they're changed by this experience. Many have reported feeling closer to people, closer to their loved ones, but particularly closer to strangers, closer to everyone with whom they come in contact. So it's an experience that not only heals, but heals the healers. So with this latest intention experiment, we're going to run one on April 26th, that's Saturday, at 10 a.m. Pacific time in America, 1 p.m. Eastern time, and that's 6 p.m. UK time, 7 p.m. European time. We're all going to do a web TV intention experiment. I'll be live and guiding you through it, and we're going to do something really historic. We're going to send intention to heal a human being. So be part of this amazing experiment. To do that, just sign up, and we'll provide you with a web link at the bottom of this broadcast. Just click on that and sign up beforehand so that you prevent a logjam on the day. We just ask you a few questions, and then you can just log on right before the experiment. Join us and be part of the biggest mind over matter experiment in history, and continue to make history, showing that all it takes is one thought to change the world. Thanks so much.
I like it's very important, you know, that the date of this event is April 26, April 26. So the date you saw there, May 27, will be the panel that will discuss the result of this event. And of course, we will have a panel with scientists, Dr. Fannin, Dr. Joe. We have even, I heard that Edgar Mitchell, the astronaut, signed up for the event. So we hope to have you know, discussion to, of course, document document what's going on and what are the results that we find. So again, I like to remind, this will be the first time that we have a worldwide intention experiment targeting a human, healing a human being. The date is April 26, 2014, April 26, 2014, and of course, you know, this will be advertised on our website, and you will probably also be receiving email. I see now we pass a little bit over the time. I understand, you know, we lack, there is much more to know, to speak about, to share. And this is why, you know, there is a workshop with Dr. Joe Dispenza, and you can visit his website to see what will be his next event. His last book, which is You Are The Placebo. It's a premiere, you know, it's just out there now, and so this is where you will have more and more information about what we spoke about. And again, I repeat, if you want to be a professional or healer or being in the wellness industry or healthcare, and apply and use these new not only concept, but, you know, way to approach the human being. We have designed the courses and program, and I invite you to visit our website and to have more information, quantumuniversity.com. So I thank you very much, Dr. Fannin, Dr. Joe Dispenza. That was an absolutely fabulous program, and I hope we should repeat that, because, you know, there is so much to see here. Thank you very much, everybody, and thank you to have participated in this event this morning or this afternoon.